Hello, welcome to this lecture. My name is Gabriela Rodrigues. I'm a land tenure expert with 7 years of experience working in the design and supervision of land tenure projects in the Latin American continent, and also a geographer working specifically in Haiti. So I'm going to talk to you about land tenure and property rights in Haiti in this lecture. So as we often have seen in the aftermath of the earthquake that hit Haiti in 2010, land tenure became a very obvious obstacle to reconstruction efforts in Port-au-Prince, in other areas. And not only that, but it also became most apparent and gained a lot of attention as a critical issue complicating development in Haiti in general. So why is that, and what are the uniqueness about land tenure and property rights in Haiti? Let me start a bit by the Haitian context. So Haiti is very often presented as the most poor country, as the poorest country in the Latin American continent, after having been the richest country in the entire French Empire for many years. But it's also important in terms of territory and of demographics. When you look at the Caribbean region, Haiti is the third largest island after Cuba and the Dominican Republic. And when we look at population, including not only the Caribbean countries, but also Central American countries, Haiti comes as the fifth most populous country in the Central America and the Caribbean, with 10 million people today. It's also, importantly, the most densely populated country in the Latin American continent, with density that's only surpassed by very small island states. When we look at environmental factors, there are some critical factors that we should look at here. The first one is that Haiti, as its name means in its indigenous language, means the mountainous land. So it's one of the most mountainous countries actually in the region as well, with 60% of slopes being above 20% steep, which is an important obstacle for agriculture without significant inputs. It's also a country that is very subject to cyclones, being located in the Caribbean belt. Also, it has a lot of risk of droughts, with many dry regions in the country that contradict this image of Haiti as a tropical country with a lush forest. And finally, as we all know, Haiti has a very large earthquake risk and many tectonic faults. Looking more in detail at what's happening in urban and rural environments in Haiti, we note that there's a lot of pressure going on urban and rural lands alike. Looking first at urban areas, today the urban population accounts for 55% of the total population, as opposed to 15% in the 1960s. And this was a result of a very outstanding, very high population growth since that time, with a growth rate of 4.3%, is the highest in Latin America. The population is mostly concentrated in the capital, Port-au-Prince, which has 2.4 million inhabitants today. It was multiplied by 10 during this period since 1960. And so this population growth, what's important here is that it has occurred due to the lack of regulation and enforcement and standards. Most people have settled on land informally and irregularly, meaning that they have no documents to the land, or that they have occupied lands that they have no right to occupy based on Haitian law. And they have also occupied many slopes in the city of Port-au-Prince, and also very vulnerable terrains in other cities like Cap-Haïtien, near the water. So they are living on very vulnerable terrain and also very vulnerable structures. And this situation was strongly aggravated by the 2010 earthquake, with people looking for more land. So in urban areas, in summary, we have a situation of informality and irregularity of tenure, which means that tenure is insecure. People can be evicted because they are informally occupying the land, but also this impedes all efforts to build housing and infrastructure in the city. When we look at the rural land, the growth of urban areas in Haiti has not decreased the pressure on rural areas. Actually, the rural population, despite migration to cities, has increased of 30% since 1960. The situation in Haiti, so agriculture is by nature subsistence farming, and it's characterized by a very important micro-parcelization, where farms average 2 parcels, and every parcel has on average half a hectare, so that's a very small plot of land that people are cultivating, and this put an extreme pressure on the environment that is already very vulnerable, as you could see in the environmental background. So in addition to that, there are other factors that put pressure on rural land. And here again, we see the informality of tenure and the irregular tenure. So through time, as I will explain to you a little bit later, people are making very informal arrangements to utilize the land. And so this doesn't give them important incentives to use the land durably, conserving environmental resources. Another factor, important factor, has been the fall of crop prices in the end of the 80s and the high demand for solid food in Haiti. 9 households out of 10 actually rely on solid fuel for energy. So the wood in the rural areas is really being exploited through tree clearing. This results in erosion and in even higher vulnerability to climate risks such as cyclones, provoking landslides and so on. So in rural areas, we also have a situation of large informality and irregularity that contributes to tenure insecurity, but also to disputes, and that negatively affects the environment and the livelihoods of people who depend on the resources. So how did we get to this situation? I'll first talk about the theory of land property rights in Haiti. So let's look at a history and characteristics of formal land rights and their administration. So when Haiti became independent from France in 1804, his newly declared emperor, Dessalines, nationalized all land except the land that was privately owned by freed slaves. So this means that right after independence, we had 2 categories of landowners in Haiti, the state and private owners. What happened since then is that these 2 categories have mostly remained intact, but land has been transacted. Land has been transferred in different ways. One way is that lands from the state have been sold, donated, or acquired through prescription by people who are using the land. Most of the donations have occurred right after the period of independence. There were donations by Pétion and Boyer, the early presidents of the Haitian Republic. And the prescription were also occurred in the years following independence, but only until 1834, which means that since then this has not been a way of transferring land. And so of all state land that has not been sold, donated, or acquired through prescription, remains state land today. When we look at what happened to the private property of Haitians, some of it has been confiscated to be integrated in the state domain, so especially in the state public domain. And here we're talking about all land that cannot be privatized, used for private use. It's for the use of all, and the perfect example is roads. Or it can have been confiscated to be part of the state private domain, which consists of all land and buildings that are affected to the use by the government or by local administrations, but also of all land that has no proof of property. And so regarding the rest of private property that has not been expropriated, it has simply been transferred through sale and inheritance to people who still are private owners today. So today you still have these 2 big owners, the state and private individuals. What are the key characteristics of statutory land rights and its administration today? So we have a culture of individual property that is very strong in Haiti and is very different from what we may imagine if we think that Haiti is similar to African countries. Communal land tenure is not common at all in Haiti. Another characteristic is that there is no prescriptive acquisition anymore, so the title determines the rights. If you occupy a land but you don't have a title to this land, you may have occupied it for 20 years or 30 years, you are not protected by the law as the owner of this land. Another characteristic is that all land that has no proof of property, that has no title, belongs to the state by default. And all land that belongs to the state is potentially subject to a lease for private users. So here what's important is to look also at what is the proof of private property in Haiti in order to be able to protect one's right. In rural areas, the proof of property consists of a survey minute and a survey plan that are prepared by a surveyor, but that must also be registered at the state level at the office of the Conservation Foncière, which is basically the registry officer. In urban areas, the proof of property is exactly the same, but also an owner must have a notary act that must also be registered and transcribed at the same institution, the Conservation Foncière. And finally, concerning the leases on state land, to have a regular lease, people must in theory have obtained a survey of this land by the state, by the service called Service du Domaine, but also to have this lease registered in a cadastre of state lands. What happened in practice? In practice, we see a situation where there is a lot of informality and irregular tenure, actually. So regarding informality, it means that people's, the way they're occupying the land actually is based on the law, but they don't have a sufficient proof of property. So we have a lot of private agreements in Haiti. They can be verbal, they can be also written, but never following the regular procedure. And one of the very important figures in Haiti in terms of informal private agreements is called indivision. This is the case when families decide at the moment they have to inherit the land to make informal arrangements between themselves to divide the land and not to formalize it. And this is tied to the cost of formalization, but also to the fact that in Haiti, all land must be divided in equal parts between all heirs. And so people, to avoid having this sort of division, they make their own arrangement and do not register the land. We also have unpaid leases. And so as a result, we have many people who don't have documents. They don't have this title to the land. They may have the title of their grandfather, of their parents, but the fact that they don't have a title leaves them under an insecurity of tenure. Even people who do have documents sometimes they think they have proof of property. These documents are very often inaccurate, so there may be missing information or wrong coordinates, or there is no geographical coordinates on the documents. The documents might have been irregularly prepared by a surveyor that was not commissioned by the state, or without passing by a judge, which should allow the survey, or the documents may exist but not be registered at the Conservation Foncière, and there are also many documents that were lost or damaged through time. As a result of the situation of informality, we have rights that are insecure. People can be evicted because they don't have a proof. And we have rights that are unclear, which is a very large obstacle when you want to do territorial development projects. So especially because state lands are not known as a result. Then regarding irregular tenure, we also have people whose occupation is not based on law, so they are not even protected by the law if they have a proof of property. One common case is potentially subleases on state land, and people who have inherited state land without passing again through the public administration. And a very common case, as I suggested before in Port-au-Prince, is the irregular settlements on private and state land. As a result, we have here not a lack of security or unclear rights, we have simply a lack of land rights, and these people who are living in steep hills and irregular settlements are potentially subject to eviction even if the state has not decided to evict them. One very interesting case is the Morne-l'Hôpital Hill in Port-au-Prince, which is an environmentally protected area, so owned by the state, but has been the subject of many irregular settlements since the 1960s, and even more now after the earthquake. Even if people are purchasing land, they do not know that this land is not privately owned, but it belongs to the state. Why did we get to the situation of informality and irregular tenure? Well, there are many obstacles to achieving tenure clarity and security. Due to the lack of new regulation, we have a situation today where the process depends on many actors and many steps. We have about 17 steps to register a private transaction of land, and 9 actors involved, each one depending on the other. We have very prohibitive costs. The estimated cost to register a piece of land in rural areas can amount to 40% of the sale value. So no wonder why many people do not go through the formal procedures. There is also a lack of means and standards of public institutions in terms of human resources, financial resources, technology, training, and also standards. So there is no quality control and supervision of what is being done by the surveyors and the notaries and the Conservation Foncière Service du Domaine. So there's an extreme lack of means to execute their mandate. And this is exemplified very well by the cadastre agency, which was created in 1984 to do the cadastre of the entire country, but so far no commune has been completed at all because this institution suffers from a very large lack of means. So finally, a very important obstacle is that today there is no clear policy on what should be done on state lands. So even if we knew where the state lands are in Haiti today, the fact that there is no policy to regularize the situation of people who are illegally settled on these lands makes it very difficult to do territorial development, to build roads, to build schools and hospitals, but also it leaves people who are settled irregularly on state land in an extremely vulnerable situation because at any point, if the decision is taken, they could potentially be evicted from these lands, in theory. What kind of solutions can we propose to deal with this situation, with this extremely challenging situation in Haiti of very widespread irregularity and informality of tenure? One solution we can think of, and is actually being done right now in a pilot project that is being executed by the Haitian government, is to clarify land tenure. And this is being done in 10 communes in Haiti right now, where they are going to every parcel in this commune. They will go in every parcel in this commune to delimitate the parcels, collect the titles, analyze the rights, and to see if they can determine if there is a clear tenure status on this parcel or not. And they will insert all this information in the land tenure database that will serve potentially as a base for a future cadastre. Another way to deal also in a very formal way with this irregularity and informality of tenure is to tackle the causes of the system. So to reform and reinforce the land administration system, which means agencies like the cadastre agency, but also the Conservation Foncière and Service du Domaine, how to give them the means to be able to truly execute their mandate and how to streamline the process to register land. And here what's extremely important is to ensure that we come up, that the Haitian system ends up being an affordable and sustainable system, because as we saw, the reason why probably people do not want to register their transaction is because the costs are extremely high. A third way to deal with this informality and irregularity is also to reform land rights. And this is complementary to the two previous solutions. So this means, especially, for example, to coming up with a solution for state lands. And in this case, as we are in the case of a very delicate situation where people are informally settled on the land, irregularly settled on the land, this process needs to be very well informed to potentially by, for example, this project that is seeking to clarify tenure. So we can see that these solutions can be very complementary. So clarifying tenure, reforming the system and reinforcing it, and reforming land rights are ideal solutions, but also very difficult to achieve on the short term. What can we think of solutions in the shorter term? One of them is to do an official recording of land tenure. So basically to collect land tenure information and to map households and parcels, but without going through the formal system, just to have it documented. And this is something that has been done after the earthquake to be able to come up with some information of what the land tenure situation is today and how to deal with it. Another solution for the short term to help inform long-term reforms is to really study and understand what is being done in social practice. So how are people transacting land? How are they accessing land? What kind of services are they using? What kind of services are they not using? And finally, another type of approach or activity is to reinforce the previous ones, is to focus on information and dissemination, simply on information dissemination, on statutory land rights and the informal practice of rights in Haiti. But what's extremely important across all this in Haiti is to pay attention in any kind of solution to the social and economic aspects of land tenure, to be able to find solutions that are sustainable and just at the same time. What are the key takeaways from the lecture? First of all, I think it's important to remember that Haiti is very different from other countries, contrary to what we may think, in the fact that the individual private property is extremely important, and also the state private property rights. The second important takeaway is that land rights administration system are very outdated, and they are not able to handle the pressure that is being exerted right now on rural and urban lands. Third of all, the informal and regular tenure are extremely dominant in Haiti, and they take multiple forms. They hinder tenure security and development in a vicious circle. And finally, this is not, there's a ways we can deal with this, so there's a range of solutions that can be short or long term, and that should be considered not only in land tenure projects, but also in other sectors. Thank you very much, and enjoy your next lecture.